It's time to talk about a legend. Bruce Lee was not only a film star, but also one of the first martial artists to train in multiple styles. Bruce Lee developed his style, named Jeet Kune Do, for street fighting, but astoundingly, many of the techniques have proven highly effective in MMA, so much so that they've become staples of the sport, despite being widely unknown and underutilized for decades. How is it possible that a man with no professional record was so ahead of the curve? Well, Lee actually trained with several champions, who valued him for both his practicality and his creativity. Having friends with so many different arts exposed Lee to a number of techniques that would not gain popularity for years, or even generations. Lee carefully considered each technique he came across. His goal was to figure out what worked best for each art. He absorbed what was useful, discarded what was useless, and added what was uniquely his own. The first technique we're going to take a look at took a long time to catch on, but once it did, it proved just how ahead of his time Lee really was. Bruce Lee's quick advanced sidekick to the knee follows Lee's principle of longest weapon to nearest target.
I'm using my longest weapon, my sidekick, against the nearest target, your kneecap. This can be compared to your left jab in boxing, except it's much more damaging.
I see.
The tactic has proven to be great for aggressive counter-strikers like Conor McGregor. Because the attack comes from so far away, it allows few opportunities to counter. Fighters are forced to either move in aggressively, opening themselves up to counters, or retreat towards the cage. For these reasons, Lee likened it to a jab in boxing. Speaking of kicks to the knee, the oblique kick was another of Bruce Lee's favorites. Only becoming prominent within the last few years, the oblique kick is used primarily to keep distance, punishing fighters who like to come forward aggressively on a heavy lead foot. This fits right in with Lee's philosophy that the highest level of achievement in fighting is the ability to intercept your opponent's attack.
What is this thing you do?
In Cantonese, Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist.
The oblique kick was a staple of savate, an old French kickboxing style that Lee found valuable. Apparently, they used to compete with steel-tipped boots, and therefore favored hitting with the toes. In Lee's book, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do, pronounced Dao if you have a man bun, Bruce advises striking with your heel. Unfortunately, I've never seen anyone throw it as a feint into a roundhouse like Lee does here. Next up is trapping. This is where you catch your opponent's punch with a parry, and then hold his hand down as you strike. This technique simultaneously takes away one of your opponent's weapons and creates an opening for yours. Recently, Tony Ferguson and Anderson Silva have been utilizing this aspect of Wing Chun. Wing Chun was Lee's original style, and while he discarded much of it, he found trapping to be highly useful when used to supplement more basic fundamentals. Boxing champion Vasily Lomachenko has also managed a less effective but still impressive version, even with the bigger gloves. In MMA, this technique is still in its infancy, but already fighters are formulating new tactics and counters around it. There have been a few instances of fighters disengaging from hand traps to land counter strikes, which you can read all about in Lee's older books when his style was still closer to Wing Chun. Longtime champion and upstanding citizen John Jones relies on every single one of Lee's techniques, so it's worth mentioning that Lee also advocated using an eye poke like a jab as your second line of defense. Just putting that out there. Last, but not least, let's look at Bruce Lee's approach to grappling. By the time he had passed, Lee, once again training with the best, had a thorough knowledge of grappling, but he had not yet developed the experience and skill to put his own unique spin on it. However, hidden in the grappling section of Tao of Jeet Kune Do is a combination that would become the go-to standard for most takedowns, the jab to double or single leg takedown. Casually drawn in, this technique would become the most used setup for wrestlers, and was used consistently by the likes of Georges St. Pierre. GSP used it to distract his opponents and raise their guard, giving them less of a chance of stifling his takedowns. It would have been fascinating to see what Lee's unique take on grappling developed into, but we can guess by his drawings that there would have been a lot of heel hooks, eye gouges, and strikes to the groin. Lee knew that no one way or style could be right all the time, but as it turns out, his personal style and his philosophy are still relevant to this day. For more techniques from the greats, you can check out my books on power, defense, and footwork, all linked below. Until next time, this has been David Christian from The Modern Martial Artist, wishing you happy training.